Hi, welcome to Peopleizer, the place to put people first. Today I will be welcoming Chris Notley. Chris, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thanks for
Thank you.
joining me.
My pleasure.
Let's go through your journey of discovering yourself, and it should empower people to discover themselves as well. Could we start with an overview of your journey pre-discovery of yourself, right? So basically the corporate world, if we can give an overview
Yeah,
to the people.
sure. I spent approaching 20 years, I guess, in a series of what I'd call permanent roles, mostly in IT, and across a number of different companies. And I guess a pattern was similar to a lot of people at the start of their career. I moved job quite often. So I think my average tenure at the beginning, the first few years of my career, was even just under a year. But I think I would describe it as quite an exciting time. I was learning lots of new things, but I got bored or fed up quite quickly with a job. So I'd start, there'd be a bit of euphoria at the beginning. I'd really enjoy the experience. I'd learn lots of new things. And then as the months went on, that euphoria quickly was replaced with frustration and boredom, either because I'd learned what I needed to learn for that job, or because there'd be some issue that I'd face at the company. So maybe it might be politics that would stop me from being able to make improvements I wanted to make, or something like this. And what I learned after a few years was that I seemed to be chasing that initial euphoria. So I'd take the new job, I'd enjoy that initial experience, and then move on to the next job. And that was the pattern I was following to kind of keep myself happy and interested. But as I got older, I started to realize, that's not a very sustainable model for feeling interested. And I started to I realized that changing job was not a solution to the frustration. It was a temporary fix. It gave me a little boost, but it wasn't the answer. So that was really the background that took me to the point of deciding to try and do something for me, I guess.
Okay. So basically, so in a nutshell, you were basically fixing the symptom, but not the root cause to a certain extent, right?
Yes, and I think, again, without wanting to sort of play back my experiences now to my attitude at the time, but I think what was happening was that I was sometimes almost hitting good periods by accident. So I'd discover I enjoyed something for a while, but then it would come and go. So it might be a project, for example. I got the opportunity to work on a project, discovered this is great, I'm really enjoying this, but then the project would come to an end, and I wasn't really sure what it was I was actually chasing, if you like. I enjoyed the experience, but I didn't really put any time into thinking or understanding what is it I want. And I think that, with the benefit of hindsight and looking back, I can see now, having spent time thinking about purpose, I can look back and say, oh yes, that point where I was enjoying a particular job, I was fulfilling my purpose, but I was doing it without intention. It was happening by accident. So when it happened, it was great. But then if I moved away from that purpose, then suddenly the enjoyment then dropped. And so I looked for something new, but not really with purpose, I guess.
Okay. What were can you remember some of the mindset that you adopted or that you had in mind when you went into the corporate world very early in your career, right? How was your view of the world or the view of the corporate world frame?
It happened by accident, really. I I did an engineering degree at university, but alongside that, I became involved in, of all things, the trampolining club at university. I did trampolining at school. I took it up again at university and really enjoyed it. And I became a coach. I got a coaching qualification in my first year, and then ended up running the club for the next 2 years. And I loved it. I really enjoyed the coaching, and I got some other coaching and teaching qualifications. So I became a swimming teacher, and I got a fitness instructor course, but I was lucky enough I had access to those courses at the university. And I was coming to the end of my degree, and I was absolutely decided I was going to move into that business. That was what I was going to do. And then at the last minute, I suddenly thought, hang on a minute, trampolining, swimming, they're not big money earners. You're not going to make a high profile career in either of those sports. I could do these as a hobby. I could do these in my spare time. And so at the last minute, I suddenly had this crisis of confidence. Well, what do I do? I've done an engineering degree. And by accident, I worked for about 6 months in a computer shop in the UK. It was just opening. My dad had sent me like an advert from the local paper. So I ended up working in this computer shop. And I mean, it was good fun. I enjoyed it. And I did enjoy the process of working with people. But then my then girlfriend, to become my wife, sent me some job adverts because she was still at university. So I found a job advert for an American company and ended up starting initially in a training job, which sort of migrated into IT. So when I look back, I was following quite a random path. So there was never a sort of a deliberate intention to be in the corporate world. I just found myself there, really.
Yeah, yeah. Basically, the early beginning has been driven by the context rather than by yourself. Yeah, I
Yes,
understand
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I sometimes look at people. I mean, my second wife, my current wife, she is a doctor, and from a very young age, she wanted to be a doctor. I mean, neither of her parents are doctors, but I sometimes envy people that have that determination from a really young age of what they want to be, and then they go through and do that job. But I never had that. I was very much I sort of did what I lived in the moment, and it's led me down some really interesting paths, and I don't regret it as for me. But there's that odd moment where I just feel I wonder what life would have been like if I'd be somebody that had a determination from a young age that they wanted to be a, I don't know, a pilot or an astronaut or a doctor or something. Yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And so how much time did you spend in the corporate world before you start to your discovery journey?
So I guess it was 94. I started. I mean, I did work before university, so I did an apprenticeship, sort of age 16 to 19, but then went back into education. But after education, 94 to 2017, so just over 20 years. Yeah,
20 years. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So let's go on your self-discovery journey, right? Did it start with the PC, the PC request?
So that I mean,
Oh,
I think there were a couple of things. So the last thing that I did in the corporate world was I was working on a project to develop a new product. So I moved from IT into a role where I was, I guess now I realize was a product engineer. So I was in a small team. It was almost like a startup embedded inside a larger business, and
okay.
we developed this product for the rail industry. And over that, it took 5 years, and that went from thinking it was easy and we could just license some technology to discovering that technology was useless and then realizing we had to start from scratch to then building a prototype and then getting the business to buy into it, and then eventually building a working prototype we could demonstrate to a customer. Eventually that was then sold, and off we went. And I learned obviously a lot of new skills being part of almost like a startup. I had to do a little bit of everything. I got involved in some of the commercial activities. I helped with the pre-sales. I did some work with the team. I did lots of things outside of my normal comfort zone. And then when that was delivered, I I basically thought, hang on a minute here, what have I got to show for this 5 years? I've had a pat on the back, a mention in a company meeting that, this service had gone live, but I just had this feeling I want something more. I want a bigger piece of the action, I guess is how I would describe it. Not just to build something for somebody else. I want to build something for me. But you're right, there was another experience that was sort of embedded in my subconscious during that time, which is that in moving into this role, I went from being inside of IT to being elsewhere in the business as a customer of that IT department. And so, yes, you're right. I had a what I now realize was a pivotal experience of becoming a customer of the department I used to work in. So my colleagues became my supplier. And one of the things that really shocked me, having spent all that time in IT, was how different IT looked from the outside, looking, from how it looked on the inside. And what I realized, I guess, was that how little interest there was in my ex-colleagues in why I was asking for the things that I was asking. And it very much felt as though they saw their role was to educate and help me converge into an offering they already had. And of course, I knew what those offerings were. Some of them I had devised and designed. And a big chunk of what I was doing was in that role, in that team, was helping bring the IT department along that journey with us so that they could understand the context of why we were asking these questions. But it left a thought with me that this could be done differently. This could be better. But yeah, fundamentally, did I ever tell you about the laptop story?
Yeah, in our pre-interview, and I think it would be wise to share it with the people because I think it's one of the trigger points for you to starting your self-discovery and doing what you love to do in life.
Yeah.
So let's go through it.
Yeah. So I mentioned, the system had gone live. I had I felt I wanted a bigger piece of the action, if you like. But the thing that really triggered it was that just after the system had gone live, I put in a requisition to get a new laptop. And I'd been at this time working for 5 years on this project. The laptop that I had even brought with me from the IT department. So the company had never paid for me to have some computer equipment. And I put a request in for a small but powerful computer, fairly expensive computer, and it was it went nowhere. I got no replies, no responses, and I chased it once and got no replies, and eventually I chased it harder, and the reply I got back was, "I'm afraid that model is for executives only." And I think, and now I do remember us having this discussion before, and it was it was a light bulb moment because at the time, my role, I had a lot of autonomy. We were this small startup. I had a lot of autonomy, but what I guess I didn't realize until that moment with the laptop was where the limits were. I hadn't pushed far enough up until then to discover where the limits were. But yeah, asking for that new laptop, that was the sudden point where I realized, okay, yeah, I'm in this walled garden. Yeah, it looks pretty, it looks beautiful, but there are still walls there, and you only have to push just a little bit further than you would push, and you discover, there is a limit, there is a barrier, there is a problem. And so that was it. That was the moment that was the final pushed me over the edge and made me decide, actually, I'm going to try and do something for me.
That's a good example because it showed the people that, okay, you're comfortable in your role. This is how you operate on a daily basis. But as soon as you try to go a little bit outside of your role, go a bit outdoor of the garden, then you are faced with the reality of the system. That you didn't perceive because usually you operate in your role and nothing changed on a daily basis. You still go to work on the same time frame and do the same thing.
Yeah.
But as soon as you try to change a little bit, you realize the reality of the system. Okay, so thanks for sharing this experience of the laptop. And so, how did your journey started? So, in 2020, you decided to. Was that the point where you
Well,
decided to create your own
no, so it
company?
was 2017, and it
2017.
was so it was in I finished. I left in July 17. I made that decision. This happened around March of 2017, and
Okay.
I resigned from my role in April, and I then worked out my notice. Finished in July. So I prepared. I started, formed a business. And then it just so happened that in the week that I was leaving that job, I got a call from a company asking if I wanted to interview for a position. I responded to them saying, look, I've been 20 plus years in permanent roles. I've decided to do something for myself. So, I'm not going to consider a permanent position. But if you want to talk to me about a freelance role, then I would consider it. And so the next week, I had a conversation with the team leader who was recruiting for the position, and that is interesting in itself because they're now a customer. He now heads a business that is my customer. But yeah, we had a conversation. I went down. This was Dyson. I went down, met with him in their Malmesbury head office. We talked about what was then a highly confidential, unreleased project to build an electric vehicle, and they wanted some help in a particular technology area aspect of it. And I ended up doing about 2 years worth of consulting with Dyson. It was really, really interesting. It was an interesting project. There were about 500 engineers in the end working on it. But again, every time I renewed the contract, every 3 months or so, I thought, did I really leave 20 years of permanent positions just to work in a freelance position, just a freelance contract? It didn't feel like the right thing. And even though it felt not quite right, it also felt very difficult to say no when they wanted to renew because it was paying well, it was money coming in. And in the end, they did me a favour. Towards the end of 2019, they cancelled the project in a very abruptly. They cancelled it, and everyone was let go. The permanent people on the project were offered a severance package, and all of the contractors, like myself, were immediately told, "That's it, go away."
Hmm.
And what I did at that point, and this was the lead up to 2020, I decided, look, first thing, take a break. Take a break, think about what it is you want to do, and then come back in the new year, 2020, and have a think about what you do want to do. Freelancing isn't right, but what is it that you really want to do? And so I was just starting to do that as COVID hit. So that takes us to 2020, and I guess the start of what I'm doing now.
Okay, so that break in 2019, how did you approach it? How did you start your discovery?
Well, I mean, it was actually quite odd because I I I felt like they had done me a favor initially. I mean, that was my first thought. It was a feeling. I mean, I wasn't there the day that it happened, but all of these guys got basically called into a room and told the project's being cancelled. Clear your desks. You need to leave in half an hour. And I mean, I remember it vividly, the day it happened, because I wasn't in the office. I was at home. I wasn't working that day. And I got a text message from one of the suppliers that I'd worked with, who worked at Vodafone. I was dealing with Vodafone and a couple of other companies, saying, just seeing the news, I hope you're okay. And I then looked up BBC News and saw the project's been cancelled. So I reached out to the guys that I work with, who were most of whom were permanent staff members on the team, to say, really sorry to hear, guys, and just let me know if I can do anything to help. Um, and but I was in shock, I think, for a little bit, and I went through what my wife's a doctor, she's a psychiatrist, and she's told me I went through a small period of depression. But I certainly had a very low mood for a few weeks, which didn't make sense to me because actually they'd done me a favor. I mean, they had to pay my notice. They wanted me on a month's notice, so they paid me a month's notice, which everything should have been great, right? But I think perhaps part of the problem was the realization that now I actually needed to take responsibility for it myself, maybe. I don't know. But so I went through a bit of a low for a few weeks, but then I started thinking at the beginning, what don't I want to do? So that's how I started the approach, and I looked at things and said, well, I don't want to be doing too much of this, or I don't want to do any of that. But I was struggling with what do I actually want to do? I could easily tell you these are the things that I don't want to do with the business, but I was struggling to find what I wanted to do. And I seemed to grasp onto the idea of the importance of a website. That seemed to me to be important. So I started working with a guy that had been an ex-colleague from 20 years ago. I had a business building websites, and he helped me build a website. And I mean, I would say he extracted the website out of me like blood from a stone. It was really hard work. And I think looking back, simply because I had no clear idea on what I wanted to do, what my purpose was. So it was really, really painful. It took probably 3 months to get this website put together, during which COVID then happened. And so I felt frustrated because here we were, I was able to offer businesses help with adapting to digital transformation or remote working, things like this. But I wasn't ready. I wasn't there and ready to do things. But anyway, the website finally got done. And this was probably around April or May. And I then thought, well, now what do I do? I'd focused so much on this website for a period of weeks and a few months. And it was the one thing that I was able to kind of focus my mind on, get the website done. But it was done. And I literally thought.
So when you say it was done, what was done? There was an offer, a service offering?
It was, I mean, looking back at it now, it was a very generic, I would call it a shop front. Like, we can do all of these things. But I mean,
Okay.
Looking back at it now with a new website, imminently about to replace the old one, it spoke to nobody. It spoke to everybody and nobody all at once, But I in my mind, it felt like I can't go out and advertise myself until I've got a website. But looking back, obviously, how can I build a website until I know what I'm going to be selling people? And so I think the problem was that it was this combination of, and lack of purpose, I think, was the thing that I recognize now. It was the issue. And basically, the moment I got the website live and operational, I literally was stuck in this mindset of, well, I literally don't know what to do next. I kept saying to people, I feel rudderless. That's how I described it. It's like, well, there's so many things that I can do, but I just don't know what to do next. And it was around this time I had two really pivotal conversations. One was terrible. One was really horrible. It's somebody that I know now reasonably well. So I'm sure she would hate the idea that I thought it was horrible at the time. But she was a business. She is a sort of a business consultant and coach. And we had this conversation where she asked me a whole series of questions around things like, who's your ideal customer? What's your unique difference? What do you offer that competitors don't? She asked me a whole series of questions in a call that we had. And I remember coming to the end of it feeling like I'm a total fraud. I literally, what am I doing here? I can't run a business. I cannot even begin to answer these questions that this person's asking me. And
Did you ever ask yourself those
no,
questions? Or was it really the first time that you were confronted to those
I
questions?
guess elements of them I think I'd ask, but certainly around who my ideal target customer was, I genuinely thought, well, I can work with so many different people. I don't know who I need to work with. And I
Mm.
had this conversation with Helen, and I then had another call a few days later with somebody else that I'd met through LinkedIn. She was a coach, and I was having a conversation with her principally to see whether she might be a good fit to work with to try and help me get out of this fix that I found myself in. And we had a conversation, and in the call, I explained this feeling of rudderlessness that I was feeling. And she asked me if I'd heard of Simon Sinek, and I hadn't. And she said to me, she recommended that I watch a YouTube video titled The Golden Circle. And so I took a note of it on my pad, wrote it down. I've always got a pad next to me. I wrote it down, finished the call, and then got distracted with something technical. A few days later, it was the day that I was meant to be having a follow-up conversation with Helen, the person that I'd had this really difficult call with the week before. We'd agreed we'd have a follow-up call, and I was dreading it. I was absolutely dreading this call. I thought it was going to be horrible. And I was looking at my pad because I'd had these meetings quite close before, and I saw this golden circle. No, that day. And just literally with less than an hour before the meeting with Helen, I watched this video. And it's all about his ethos around purpose. And so, and it was like my brain exploded. He talked about, in his definition, the distinction between why we do things, how we do those things, and what the things we were doing. And I had this massive realization that I just spent the last 3 to 4 months focusing all of my attention on what I did, but not 1 second thinking about why I was doing it. It was all about what are the things I'm going to offer, what are the things I'm going to do. The best I ever managed was the hows, but most of my focus was the what's. And I was sort of reeling from this experience. And it led me to then basically find a coach to work with to go through the find your why process that Simon's team has defined over the years. And I worked with her over a couple of weeks, and basically I found my why. But more importantly, I learned a lot more about hows, and it helped me understand who I want to work with. So this business around who's my ideal customer, it taught me some key things about the type of customer I want to work with, and it helped me realize that I'm not too worried about what business they're in, but I know the things that are important about the match, what makes it a good match. And yeah,
Before we go to the match, let's pause a little bit on the why, because I think it's a key point of our interview. So talk to me a little bit about the why, your why specifically,
yeah,
your equivalent to your purpose,
yeah.
right?
So I mean, the funny thing about it is that it seemed all important at the time, discovering what the why was. But actually, I mean, my why is helping other people to make an impact in the world. So
Okay.
I'm motivated I'm motivated by helping make things possible. I guess that's the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning, is helping somebody else realize a dream or make an impact in a market. And it's funny because the why itself is so much less important to me now. The actual wording of the why is less important, but what it's helped me understand is the motivation and the determination of my customers is as important to me as what market they're working in and so on. So, but yeah, fundamentally, it's all about helping other people achieve their goal.
So the why gave you the direction basically to take, right? Now let's talk about the how. How did you put this in place once you have identified the
Yeah.
why?
So, I mean, the key things. So the valuable thing for me was realizing the so I mean, his process notionally. You tell your story of your life to somebody who doesn't know you, and they look for these threads, these common threads that link some of the stories together, and these become your hows, as how you make your impact in the world. And then the one that really seems to bond them all together or is the most important becomes the why, the most important. But the key thing for me was realizing that I needed to. So, for example, one of the things that I thought I had to do was do hard and difficult sales. I thought I'm going to have to sell people on why they need a solution. But what this pivoted my viewpoint at this time is realizing no, I don't want to work with customers who need me to tell them they've got a problem. Yeah. I only want to work with customers who know they have a problem and they want to solve it. The bit that I add value is in helping them solve the problem. And the moment that I realized that was it was like a huge weight was lifted from my shoulders because I don't have to do the hard selling or the hard marketing. If there are other people out there in the market who do that and enjoy it, and they can take that part of the market. So that was the most powerful thing for me, was realizing I need to tell a good story. And the journey that I guess I've gone on since that time is really understanding better and better ways to explain that story to my customers. That's the bit that's improving. It's taken longer than I thought, but the key, that pivotal moment of realization, I need to define what I do well. I need to find ways to communicate it, and then I need the people with the problems, to come to me. And sometimes that may be referred by other people. Sometimes it might be they see a LinkedIn post that I put in, and sometimes it might just be chance, that just luck. But what I don't try to do is broadcast to tell people you don't realize you have a problem. Here is what the problem is. This is why you should come and work with me. I just don't do it anymore. Well, I never did it.
Yeah. So it's really essential. Yeah, we're talking about the market segment, the target persona, a persona that has a problem but is also seeking for solution. Right? You don't need to sell too much. They're already aligned
Yeah.
with your mindset and
Yeah.
with your
And
story.
and I've
If
had,
I understand.
over the last 3 years, I've had several what I would call near misses, customers that they might know they have a problem, but they can't get agreement on working on a solution. So maybe the operations manager sees a problem, but they can't persuade their CEO to invest in a solution. Well, that's not a good fit. There have been other cases where I've been introduced to somebody. It's initially seemed like a good fit, but then after we start working together, we realize, yeah, it's not the right fit. But I've also had two or three customers where it has gelled nicely. And one of the ironies I mentioned, calling back to earlier in the call, so a customer of mine that I have now, I've been working since 2020, but they've been growing along the way. Was founded by four guys, sorry, who worked in this team that were that left Ison, and they formed a business, and they've become a customer of mine, and they've grown. They've now got 20 or so people, and I'm now, they're becoming a more and more important customer for me. But I've been helping them grow. But again, the key sweet spot is that they have understood they have a problem. they've come to me to solve it, not come to me to ask for some advice and then ignore it. For example, it's, they want a solution, not a talking shop.
Okay. And so what do you specifically do now in your business? If you can word it in a
Yeah, so I
clear
mean,
way.
we've got a couple of key things that we do, but the key marketing message for us now is that we help digital startups that are building cloud infrastructure grow more quickly. That's the key thing that we do. So we're a managed service provider. We deliver most of the services you would expect an IT supplier to provide, some licenses, support, some implementation services. But our focus is on digital startups and scale ups that need and want to grow, and we help them grow.
Okay. And so you do that by yourself with your own company, or you expand as a
So
team
I've got a
now?
small team. I've got a couple of people that work for me, but what I've also got is a series of partnerships. So I resell a number of systems and solutions that I incorporate into my offer. So, for example, we partner with a company called Jump Cloud, a US cloud directory service. We're an MSP partner with them, so we incorporate their solution into our offer to help teams grow remotely. For example, it's a tool set. So, there are some services that we've developed ourselves, and there are lots of services that we've incorporated from partners that we've built relationships with. And then the other part of the business, which is around IoT, Internet of Things connectivity. So we have basically, if you like, a cellular offering that allows customers to deliver high quality, high availability bandwidth to devices in remote locations. So it's quite niche. It's not something that's our primary marketing. Basically, the business we have with it, people typically come to us because they're referred to us by another customer. But we have a customer, an agricultural customer in the UK, for example, who takes a managed service from us that allows their moving factories that move around fields, packaging orders that go off to supermarkets. They buy that solution from us, and so we provide that connectivity for them. But yeah, so they're the two things that we're doing. But we're looking to grow. We're looking to try and build that particularly the MSP business. That's sort of my key focus for this year, is to build some more customers there. So.
Okay. When you need to grow your team or basically bring new people on board, do you now look more at the mindset of the people and their purpose during a potential
Absolutely.
interview? Because usually we hire for a function, right? For an expertise, for a skill. We don't really
Yeah.
hire for a purpose. But I suspect, as you have done the journey, how do you approach an interview with someone that you would like to
No,
bring
totally.
on
Well,
board?
I mean, for me, the most important attribute I now recognize is curiosity. So, for me, that it's crucial. The thing that, and it feeds back your question you asked earlier about my experience in IT. One of the key things that we do, I want us to do differently, and we are doing differently, is I see our role is not to help you understand how to use the technology we're giving you better, but rather we need to understand how your business works, what your challenges and problems are, and then deliver solutions to you that meet those needs, not get you to converge to the limitations of the systems. And that doesn't mean that there aren't compromises. There are always compromises between cost and time and so on. But for me, it's that part of that is curiosity. I need people who are interested in what our customers do, that want to find out how the different departments operate, what services and products they sell, why certain things are more important to them. So curiosity is absolutely crucial. If you're not curious about your life in general, but including your job, then I think there's other jobs out there that would suit better. So certainly curiosity is absolutely key. The other thing I guess that's super important to me is transparency. So I want people who are able to ask for help, that are able to recognize, I don't know the answer to that. I'll find some help to get that. So that's another thing that's really crucial. I mean, the technical skills are not unimportant, but you can teach somebody something technical. What you can't do is teach them to be curious or teach them to be honest and transparent and care. So yeah, definitely those are really crucial points. And also, I want to build a team of people that I want to impart the idea, put some investment into your own purpose, and it may be that as a result you move away from us, but the chances are high that actually, we may come back together again at some point. And actually, I think it's that story of the Simon Sinek video I've told to so many people, and I've recommended to so many people. It's really valuable to understand your purpose. Well, the way I described it to a lot of people is that before I did that piece around purpose, it was like I'd been dropped in the middle of a jungle, and I didn't have a map. I didn't know where I was trying to get. And so it seemed like every step I took was critical. Every step I took was potentially terrible or awful or good and what purpose has given me is I now know where I'm heading. I can see the destination, and suddenly it's made the next step less critical, because if I misstep to the side, well, I can always step back because I know where I'm heading. But before I had the purpose, it was like my whole focus was on every individual step. It was trying to work out, is this the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Is this the right job? But now I'm much more relaxed about what I do next, because it doesn't matter if it doesn't go quite right, because I can fix it and head back towards the right direction. So.
Yeah, I agree with this feeling, and I have also the same feeling. Basically, you like being on a boat and you know the direction. You're not scared of getting lost. You know that you can venture on the right, but you come back to you have a clear direction in your life, and that's
the
the main
individual
point.
steps become less important. I mean, it doesn't mean you can't have a bad day, but the whole point is that you know that what you need to do to fix it. I'm going to make some bad decisions. I can bring myself back towards the correct path. So yeah.
All right. Chris, that's great. I like the story. There's a lot of actionable tips, like the fact of asking yourself what you do not want. That's very important. Like the direction in your life, finding the why. We'll share the link to the video as well, so that more people can watch it and start going toward and building their own journey rather than living the path
definitely.
of someone else, I would say.
Great.
Thanks for your time, Chris.
Thank you.
It was
My
great
pleasure.
to have you.
Been really nice to relive some of those moments.